Join me, Harriet Gould, for the Lab Matters podcast to hear fascinating stories every week from the inspiring people behind the science. In this episode of Lab Matters, we're joined by Professor Stephen Ashworth, a lecturer at the University of East Anglia and a seasoned traveller who has an intriguing connection with the Women's Institute. So today we have with us Professor Stephen Ashworth. Stephen is the recipient of multiple awards and fellowships. Stephen is distinguished in the world of scientific education, and education has turned out to be a theme of your career, hasn't it? You've educated, then you specialised, and now you educate again. Hello, Stephen. Is that about right?
Hello, Harriet. Yes, it's about right. I started off, my family was not one that had gone to university before. In fact, both my parents left school at about 14. And so these days I would have been a target for widening participation.
Wow.
And I was lucky enough to get into, by hook or by crook, to get a scholarship to go to an independent school for my high school. And that's where things sort of took off.
Where was your high school?
High school was King Edward's in Norwich, just by the cathedral, which was a very special place to go to school.
How so?
Well, imagine assemblies 6 days a week in Norwich Cathedral.
Gosh,
for
yeah.
10 minutes, and then 700 lusty males singing their various hymns that we sang. Jerusalem was the favorite at the end of term.
Oh, the mind boggles.
And then it was off to university. I was lucky enough to secure a place to get to Oxford to read chemistry. And I stayed at Oxford to do a PhD. Then it was off to the United States for me for the first postdoc. I landed up in Boulder in Colorado. Very beautiful place. Very different from Norfolk, of course, with mountains and things. And after that, one of the people I worked with there ended up going to Berlin. So I managed to follow him with a couple of fellowships, one from the Royal Society Exchange Fellowship and the Deutsche Akademisches Austauschdienst. And the other one was an Alexander von Humboldt Stiftung fellowship. And that's where I met my wife. Well, no, she wasn't my wife then. She's my wife now. But that's where we met, and that's another story altogether. But after that, I was looking to move back to the UK, and I was successful in getting another fellowship. I was unsuccessful in getting a job. I had
job.
I had two interviews to different chemistry departments and didn't get them. But then the fellowship, it was an advanced fellowship from the Engineering and Physical Sciences Research Council. So that got me to Bristol. And then it was about 3 years of those 5 in Bristol. And I realized that it was unlikely there was an opening for me there. I really would have liked to have stayed at Bristol, but they'd already done succession planning for their staff.
What did you like about Bristol?
Oh, it was a nice place. There were lots of people doing the sorts of research that I was really interested in, and it was a really great place to be work-wise. Very good place to be just from family-wise, bringing up 2 young daughters, which we'd produced by that point. But I could see the writing on the wall. So that was a time in this country when chemistry departments were actually closing down. I don't know if you remember the bad old days, but then I saw an advert for the UEA, University of East Anglia, which of course is in Norwich. That's almost my hometown. Put me in very easy reach of my family if I could get that job. And they were advertising for 5 lectureships in chemistry, which looked to me as though they weren't going to shut, at least not in the medium term. So I applied for the job. They were foolish enough to accept me, and here I still am.
You still are. How long's it been? How long have you been there?
Middle of this year, it'll be 25 years.
Pretty loyal.
Oh, well, I've got the anchor of family keeping me here.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, once the children got into the school system, you don't really want to move around and disrupt that if you can really avoid it.
Mm-hmm. So when you first started there in UEA, how did it feel? What were you doing for a start?
I was trying to set up my own laser lab to do laser spectroscopy experiments. It was very hard to get the funds to do that because partly because of the conditions of the fellowship and partly because it's just difficult to get funds for that particular branch of the sciences.
Mm-hmm.
But I managed to hitch my star to a wagon of John Plain. John Plain is now in Leeds, and he was looking at atmospheric chemistry, which obviously is gas phase, which is what I wanted to do, something in the gas phase. And so my laser spectroscopy helped his measurements of reactions in the atmosphere. And that was a very productive time.
Mm. And that's what helped get your project on the road.
Well, yeah, they got me started, but then of course John Plain moved away to Leeds, and I didn't, so that left me sort of high and dry, as it were. And that's when it was about that time that I was thinking more of changing my emphasis from research to teaching. I had already built up some science communication expertise at that point, and so that my teaching here had been well received, apparently, by students and colleagues alike.
Mm-hmm. So at what point did you start traveling? Because you've done quite extensive traveling, a lot in Asia. Even recently, you were over there doing all sorts of things. Do you want to tell me a little bit about that?
Well, the traveling grew out of the science communication. Okay, so obviously, first there was the uprooting to Boulder, Colorado, which we've already mentioned, and then to Berlin. And it's great to see how the other half lives. But the globe trotting I've done more recently is very much the science due to the science communication.
Mm-hmm.
And that actually started when I was still in Bristol. The Engineering and Physical Science Research Council decided to try and get their researchers out on the road to justify the tax pounds that are being spent on their various research projects. And so they had this set up this pilot program, what they called the Partnerships for Public Understanding.
Okay.
And I'd been on a 2-day course at Techniquest, which is a science centre in Cardiff. I'd been there to learn how to present science to a non-specialist audience. And I had been inspired as a child by the Royal Institution Christmas lectures. I loved them, couldn't get enough of them.
Did you have
Always
a
made sure I
favorite?
was sure I was home in time to watch them, because none of streaming or catch up or anything. If you missed it in those days, you missed it. And so I had this in my mind as what I could use for the course at Techniquest, and then I put in a application to this pilot program to get some money to put on the sorts of demonstration lectures that you would see at the Royal Institution at Christmas time. The only problem is Royal Institution has the space and the technical expertise to build really big, impressive demonstrations. And my plan was to put these in the boot of the car and drive around local WIs to give them these demonstration lectures. So I had a cunning plan, and that was to make everything miniature. And if I needed to show everyone a big picture, I could use a video camera through a data projector. And again, you have to remember that my data projector was in a suitcase. It was that big and bulky in those days. But anyway, I put in this application. It was successful. So I got some money and I bought some kit. And it was just when I was starting to travel, start wanting to get out and about to put these lectures on. That's when I moved up here. And I'd chosen the WI because as a scientist, I'm lazy. Scientists like to be efficient, they call it, but basically you don't do something twice if you only have to do it once.
Farmers are the same.
Okay.
Called double handling. You avoid double handling.
Yes, exactly. So when I was on this course, they were telling us how to book a venue and do your advertising and things like that. And I thought, now, I don't want to have to go through that and have the shame of no one turning up to my lecture. So where can I get a ready-made audience? Ready-made audience that has a hall and that already will do the advertising for me. WI, speaker meetings every month. They have their handbook that goes around with all the lists of speakers in. Fantastic, I thought. So when I got here, I'd done a couple of practice runs with the lecture and I tweaked it here and there to make it run a little more slickly. Rang up these WI central office here in Norfolk and said, right, I've got this demonstration lecture. When can I come and do it? And they said, oh, you'll have to audition first.
Oh, wow.
So these audition days are quite scary because what they do is invite representatives from WIs in a area and they book a village hall and everyone comes there for a whole day. And then they have a series of neo speakers, wannabe speakers, and you get judged. It's a bit like, it's not quite like Strictly or anything, but they'll say, was it interesting? Was it entertaining? Did you have off-putting nervous tics and things like that? And so you rock up, you do a sort of potted version of your talk and then go away and wait for the response. And then you get I got the response that I was accepted into the yearbook.
Well done.
And you send off a little description of your talk and pay the fee. And so you then wait for the bookings to roll in. Now, what you have to understand is the WI books about 18 months in advance. So this started me off on the technology of, I got a Palm Pilot so that I was able to book things in my diary years in advance.
Gosh, a Palm Pilot, that really is.
Yeah, it's back in the day.
Technology.
And then there's a box here. They tick, can you do a lecture at short notice? So I ticked this box thinking, oh, what's short notice? Well, to me, short notice is sort of 24 hours, 48 hours. And yes, I would be able to do that. But someone rang me up and said, oh, it says in this book that you can do lectures at short notice. I said, yes, yeah, that's what I can do. Well, our meeting is in 3 months' time. So what happened? Someone had dropped out, and this was going to be my very first WI. So I turned up. I was a bit nervous, of course, because these can be intimidating, these groups. Because the thing is, with the WI, you don't know who's in the audience. There might be a professor of chemistry in there for all you know.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And so there I am. I gave my talk, and I was packing up, thinking, oh, that could have gone better, but wasn't too bad. The lady came up to me, and all she says was, much better than hats, and walked off. Well, obviously they were going to have a talk on hats, and this was the lady that had cried off, or the person, I don't know if it was the lady. And so that was my first feedback. But this then developed, and I had every year I developed on a new, because it was a 3-year project. So I said I was going to put on a talk every year. And the thing was with these EPSRC grants, it had to be linked to research.
Mm-hmm.
And there was another phase of the program, and 3 years later, I got some more money and developed some more stuff. And about that time was when I was introduced to a co-collaborator, if you like, in South Africa. And this co-collaborator invited me to go to their National Science Festival to do one of these talks. And I did, and I really enjoyed it. It was funny though. First, I rocked up at the airport. You have to get to what was then Port Elizabeth Airport, and then there was a driver to take us to Grahamstown, which is about 2-hour drive away from Port Elizabeth. It's now Grahamstown is now Mukunda. But I was in the same car as this little lady, a journalist, and she was the PowerPoint police. So I had to whip out my PowerPoint presentation there in the car, and fortunately my laptop had enough battery, and go through it with her to make sure that she approved it. But no, we got there and did the stuff, and I went back the next year, and the director took me to one side and said, you're a chemist. What we're lacking in these shows is some chemistry with readily available materials. Could you do something like that? And so I thought about it for a bit, and I thought of all the ideas I could steal from use from other people, utilize from other people. And so that's what I did. And that eventually became kitchen chemistry. It's gone through a couple of iterations, and it's slowly developed over the years, but that has now become what I'm mainly known for. And that's why I get to travel everywhere. Mm-hmm. So most recently I was in Malaysia and Singapore. Mm-hmm. So Johor, which is right at the southernmost tip of continental Malaysia. And then, so it's a short car drive to Singapore. And what I do there is go into schools, mainly schools that we'd like to know about UEA. And I do my kitchen chemistry. And generally you get a good response, both from the children and the teachers. It's always funny because they don't know quite what to make of it when we say, oh, we can come and do this for you. What's that? But then afterwards they say, oh, can you come back? Which is quite nice.
Speaks for itself. And of course, kitchen chemistry has a lovely ring to it for a start, but it's also so accessible, from an application perspective. It's always nice when you hear the science in context of something that's relevant to you. And kitchen chemistry works for everyone.
Well, yes, I'm not teaching you how to cook or even how best to dunk a biscuit. It's all chemistry, like acids and bases, color changes, reactions that you can do with stuff that you can buy on the high street or in the pharmacy or the hardware store.
Mm-hmm. Relatable. Perhaps that's what makes it popular. Or maybe it's you, Stephen.
Well, no, I'm sure it's the subject. I'm sure it's not me.
Modest as ever. So you've relocated so many times. You've spoken just a little bit about that, but there has been a lot of traveling. I mean, how did you find the difference in culture when you first, for example, when you first went to Boulder, Colorado? Was it a complete shock? Were you homesick?
I wasn't homesick. I was out of puff quite a lot for the first few weeks because obviously you're a mile high in Boulder, Colorado. It's altitude. So that was very sapping. No, I think it's like everywhere. You have certain people have imposed certain cultures on their groups. The guy I was working with had a very, very strong work ethic, perhaps a little too strong. And that was tough going. But after I'd done some time there, I moved over to another place. So I started in the Joint Institute for Laboratory Astrophysics, which is at the universities. So that's known as JILA. That's where I started. But after a while, I moved over to NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. And there it was completely different culture and very, very easy, sort of easygoing rather than must work, must work, must work. And so I'm glad I didn't just see one side of that, because obviously if you only see one side or one little bit of the country, you get a very distorted picture and don't get a real feel for the whole. So I think I saw the two extremes of that work culture there.
And then coming back to the UK, you're quite happy making that transition?
Well, yes, I had a few months, I think it was, in the UK, and then I was off to Germany. So that was something else again, learning a new language. But then having someone live with you who's a German speaker, is a inspiration, shall we say, to learn a language quickly.
Is that your wife?
That is my now wife, yes.
Yeah.
And there it was very, very different. The buildings we were in were former Eastern Bloc buildings, and so they were listed unter Denkmalschutz. And first time I went in the lab, all there was this absolutely humongous laser table. So just a huge stainless steel table with lots of holes drilled in it with threads in that you could bolt things to, and a telephone. That was it.
Wow.
And we were starting this lab basically from the ground up. And so then slowly components started to arrive, and we had to build stuff for new. And yeah, it's the institute is still going, and it's very successful.
Do they have you back for guest lectures?
No, I don't think so. I was too much of a chemist for them. It was femtosecond spectroscopy, so you were building lasers that gave very, very short pulses of light. And that was not the way I wanted to do it. It seemed they were, at the time at least, it seemed they were building a laser that was pushing the boundaries and then saying, what problem can we solve with this laser? And I'd come from a culture where I've got a question I want to answer. How do I set about answering it? But no, it's a different culture, different way of looking at the scientific world. I'm not saying anyone's better than the other. It was just different for me.
I wonder if it's harder. I imagine it's harder to get funding for a solution that doesn't actually solve a problem.
Yes, it's hard to get funding these days, just full stop. There's a lot of things about the system that you would like to be different, like more money, but there's a limited purse, and so we have to try and get the least worst way of distributing those funds.
You're here with me, Harriet Gould, for the Lab Matters podcast. If you like what you hear, please rate us on your favourite podcast platform. You mentioned earlier about the dark ages when all the chemistry departments were closing down.
Yeah, yes.
Then obviously it's all picked up a little bit since then.
Yeah, it has. I don't know quite why. Perhaps maybe the people are focusing a little more on doing degrees where there's some sort of job at the end. Of course, the universities go through the demographic ups and downs depending on how many youngsters there happen to be in the country, and there's also the things coming online, so apprenticeships are absorbing some of those young people as well now. And And the cap coming off student numbers meant that everyone was scrabbling for those fees, the fees that are attached to each student that you manage to admit. So yeah, there's all sorts of different pressures. And trouble is, something like a chemistry department is not something you can switch on and off. We won't accept students for a couple of years and then see what it's like 2 years later. If it's gone, it's gone.
Mm.
And it's not just chemistry departments. There are other departments where you just can't turn them on and off. So you've got to try and either struggle through the meager times like UEA has been doing just recently, or just bite the bullet and say, no, it's got to go. And that's goodbye to that. But we've recently tried to start a physics degree because there seemed to be untapped demand for physics.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, 25 years ago, UEA shut its physics department.
Wow. And because you studied in chemistry and physics equally, is that right?
No, my degree is purely chemistry. I went to the dark side when I started my PhD. So that's
Right.
when, well, you could argue it's the dark side, but lasers make light. So it was possibly the light side. But then it became more physical chemistry. And so I've been in that hinterland between physics and chemistry, neither one nor the other quite, but some perfect mixture of both.
So UEA is lucky to have you. You can turn your hand to the new department.
Well, yes, I've been doing a lot. In fact, most of my teaching to undergraduates is now physics teaching rather than chemistry teaching. But of course, I don't get to teach the really advanced subjects that you need to have done a physics degree for.
Mm. So what goes into preparing a physics degree?
Oh, well, you've got to set up some labs of some kind. There's got to be a practical element.
Mhm.
And that was probably the most difficult for us because, okay, we'd had a new block built, which was really nice to have. And there's a really great lab equipped with the electronics things that the computing guys use, but it's a matter of then getting the equipment to allow the students to do something that's useful and physical. And sometimes it seems, I'm sure they think we're cheapskates because hanging masses on a rubber band, it's really important physics going on, but it doesn't seem very whiz bang.
It's all what you get out of it that counts.
Well, that's the thing. We try and train the students to be able to think for themselves and investigate these things rather than following a script.
Mm-hmm.
Then, of course, you have to have, there are certain subjects that you need to cover. Certainly, the Institute of Physics used to have a very rigid core of physics that they needed a physics degree at least to touch on this whole list of subjects. So we had to make sure that that's what our physics degree looked like. And well, with some helps from the chemistry department and the applied maths side of mathematics, then we managed to put something together. Oh, and environmental sciences for the geophysics.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to work quite well.
It's a nice little selection for people to get involved in, by the sounds of it.
Oh yeah, they have done a good job in getting some physicists graduated.
So you touched ever so briefly on the tuition fees. How do you feel about such topics?
Well, it's one of those things. The prices are going up. There's no way of avoiding it. It's going up for everyone. And the universities are expected to do the Well, actually, nowadays we seem, at least from my point of view, we seem to be expected to do more with the same amount of money as we had several years ago per student. And so something's got to give. There are only so many efficiencies you can pull out of the system. And then the system starts to break down, or people do. And that's not what we want. So, of course, it's very easy. If you've got lots of money, it's very easy to spend it. And there are good reasons why that can be wasteful. But there are equally good reasons why you might want to fund your universities, maybe in a different way, maybe more per capita, or just make sure that not too much is expected of the staff that are trying to make the money go as far as it needs to.
That sounds like a very diplomatic answer. Well done.
I do my best. The thing is, if you got lots of money, it's very easy to spend money if you've got it. Then if you haven't got it, you've got to decide strategically where it's got to go, and that's the difficulty.
I mean, presumably it's easier to justify getting the money if you've got something to spend it on. And if you end up not spending it, it's harder to get it again.
Well, that's what you're taught with budgets. If you don't spend it this year, you won't get it next year, which in some ways is a little wasteful. And because you end up saying, I've got this little bit of money left. What can I spend it on so that I get the same amount of money next year? And now there are ways of accounting that some universities use. Ours is one of them, where you can't actually save up that little pot of money. If you haven't spent it by the end of the accounting year, it's gone. And rather than saying, well, I'm going to save this and put it together, if I do the same next year, then I can buy something substantial, or I can pay for that new piece of software. But no, that can't be done. And I'm sure there are good accounting reasons for why we do it the way we do, but it's just not apparent to me. it's not how I would run my household finances.
Understood. No, it doesn't sound very domestic, does it? No. So I wonder, it's not all work and science. It's you do a few things to relax and take your mind off things.
One or two.
One or two. What's your favorite?
My favorite, the one that takes up the most time, is playing the trombone.
Oh yes.
So I play bass trombone in a local brass band. In fact, the brass band started 10 years ago. There were a group of players that are sort of a bit of a loose end and got together and found a rehearsal space, and we've attracted more players over the years. Of course, COVID put a crimp in things because we weren't allowed to play, and then we were allowed to play if all of the windows were open and we sat miles away from everyone else. And so, rehearsals became fun once the rules got relaxed. Very cold, but the band has gone from strength to strength, and we compete. We're a competing band, so we compete every year in the regional competition, and 4 or 5 times now we've been to the national finals, and it's a lot of fun. That's what I'll be doing tomorrow evening. We'll be practicing for the competition, which is in Stevenage in March.
Gosh, it's very, very impressive. So look, just before we go, what I like to get a feel from people is what their vision is for the future of their particular area of expertise. If you could change one thing, perhaps, what would it be? And if you could achieve one thing, what would it be?
Oh, that's difficult. What I would really love to do for an achievement is get another sabbatical.
Okay.
In 2013, I spent 3 months from January to just beginning of April traveling around South Africa doing shows in schools. And an achievement would be to get to do that again.
Yeah, I can understand that. Sounds great.
Well, the thing was, the National Science Festival people organized everything. They just gave me basically the GPS of where to go next, and I drove off. I covered about 11,000 kilometers crisscrossing south. Obviously, it didn't work out that I could slowly work my way from one place to another, so I had to crisscross the country. It's fantastic, and I got to see so much of it. And of course, traveling by road like that, you do see so much of it.
I vaguely
That would
remember
be.
seeing your photos from that trip, actually.
Well, there were some videos as well. So I
Yeah.
tried to do a video blog as I went along. And to have the time and the energy to travel the world and bring kitchen chemistry to all, well, I won't say four corners of the globe, but you know what I mean. I
Spread it
haven't
far and wide.
I haven't conquered America yet. Maybe that's a goal that I should have.
Right. See who we can send this to in America. Americans listening. And if you could change one thing.
Oh, if I could change one thing, I would change the need or the feeling I have that I need to work more hours than contractually obliged.
That's an interesting one.
So, yeah, I think that many of my colleagues and I feel that there is an assumption that we're 37 and a half hours is the absolute minimum you're going to do in a week rather than the goal. And so talking to people, I just get the feeling that they're busy, and then they're busy in the evenings and they're busy at the weekends. And this busyness is to do with their job rather than being able to relax and play in a band or knit or swim or whatever they want to do in their spare time.
Yeah. Well, that would be nice if people felt that they were doing their job and there was no expectation beyond the remit of that job.
Well, I
I don't
understand
know.
that
I
there are
don't know if it's
those.
possible.
I understand that there are those people that are so keen and so excited about what they do. They just have to do it more, and yeah, that's fine. But there's I just get the feeling that there's an expectation rather than do it if you'd like, rather than you're going to have to do it because this is what we need you to do. Otherwise, the job doesn't get done.
Well, I can't. I wonder how you're going to manage to get that one changed.
Yes, well, it's a
Watch this
matter
space.
of getting more money into the system, I suppose, so you can spread out the work over more people.
There it is. There we go. It all comes back to money.
Always does.
Well, look, Stephen, it's been such a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you for carving out a little bit of time from all the work and the trombone practice.
Yeah, well, that's what I've got to do when I get home.
Yeah. Well, I'll follow up with you and see how you get on in those championships.
Thank you very much. It's been lovely talking to you.